Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar session. Great to have you with us today. I can see you're all just joining from the lobby right now. 41 attendees. Brilliant. That's great to have you here with us. Today, the session is going to be about 45 to 50 minutes long. We're going to be having some Q&A at the end. We're joined today by Simon and Sarah. So we're just going to do some quick introductions. So Sarah, I'll hand over to you for an intro.
Hi, yes. Hello, everybody. My name's Sarah Mura. I am currently the Vice President of Global Internal Communications at Elsevier. I've been delivering internal comms in one form or another for about 25 years. I'm very lucky at the moment to be embedded in an organisation that's been using AI for 20 years and is very much at the front of embedding AI in our products and thinking about how we use AI for efficiency and productivity. So, yeah, excited to share some of our thinking and learning with you today.
And Simon, over to you.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Si. So I look after employee engagement at The Surgery. So we're an internal comms design and digital agency. I realise I've been doing employee engagement for 20 years this year, which makes me feel incredibly old. I guess in terms of AI, last year I probably took about a dozen teams through some basic AI training in IC, just thinking about how they could be using it, how they kind of get those first steps going. And I've somehow ended up as kind of AI guy. It's kind of improved my gardening, taught me how to do
AI
photography.
side, did you say?
Yeah, there we go. It should write itself. But yeah, it's become a way of life, I guess, for me. And it's great to be here talking about it with you guys.
Thanks both. And I'm Alex Graves. I'm the Chief Visionary Officer at Silicon Reef. We're a Microsoft partner specializing in all things Microsoft 365. And you can't say the word Microsoft now without thinking about Copilot and everything that's going on in that world. And I'm here today to give you the breadth of understanding of what I know about how Copilot is changing the world of internal comms and the conversations I'm having regularly about the intranet. So that leads me nicely into what we're going to cover off today. 6 main points of conversation today. We're going to try and rattle through as much of it as we possibly can. We've even got some live demos. So with the demo gods being with us again, Simon and I have both had little hiccups this morning. And some of you may notice that Sarah is kind of vertical on her phone because her camera stopped working on her laptop today. So she's got set up with a phone on in between a couple of bottles, I think she said, in a very professional standard way. But great that we've actually got here. So hopefully everything else from a technical perspective works with us today. Q&A, the Q&A is open, so please use the chat. And thank you. Somebody has just done a laugh reaction. It's good to know that you guys are there. So please use the reactions throughout the webinar today. Use the thumbs up, use the heart. Yeah, use that one too, the one with the mouth open. That's one of my favorite ones, a surprise one. Hopefully there'll be a few surprises, but all of them positive and good. Thank you, everybody, for doing that. Right, let's kick off into the first topic. So to set the scene around how we're going to go through the rest of these slides, what we're going to look to do is to talk about the structure, will be conversational. So we've got, I'm joined today by Sarah and Si, both experts in their fields, lots of experience across them as well. So it's going to be a combination of some slides to talk through and to frame the conversation, as well as demos. But again, please use the chat to try and get involved as well. So it's a really interactive session. So Si, I'm going to start off by inviting you to talk about some of the insights that you've learned from the surgery around AI confidence.
Yeah, awesome. Would you mind jumping on the slide, Alex, and I'll explain a little bit more. So I guess, when we're talking about kind of progressions in AI and, hopefully some exciting things that we are and could be doing today, I wanted to kind of take a moment first to think about actually employees and where their heads are at before we get too excited and too far down this route. Because I think we know from psychology that decisions are driven by emotion, right? We like to think we're all super logical and rational creatures, but we're all irrational and emotional. That's just the kind of reality of it. So we need to think about where people's heads are at and ultimately kind of meet them where they are. And I like this research because it came out from Pew last year, right at the end of the year. So it's very kind of recent. Several thousand people across 25 countries. And, what they found was that people are anxious about AI. So you have a small group of people whose excitement outweighs that. You've probably got 3 of them on the call today. But most people, even if they are kind of excited, have got anxiety alongside that. And I think, knowing that's where our people are at, we need to think about how we help them, how we get that conversation kind of out in the open, how we kind of address almost like the elephant in the room. And you know, in IC, there's obviously pressure in terms of supporting the move to kind of AI and taking people on this journey. Well, actually, you know, let's start with how they're feeling. And if I think of, you know, what we did at the surgery, and, you know, bear in mind we're you know, sort of smallish agency, so it's perhaps a little bit simpler for us. But we actually kind of sat everyone down and we had these open conversations, and we said, you know, how are you feeling about AI? What are you worried about? What's kind of going through your head? We could talk a bit about here's what the business is kind of thinking about, give some kind of reassurances, but just kind of give that forum to kind of let the steam out, let the pressure off a little bit. And then off the back of that, set up some communities so people can kind of, you know, share where they're kind of like learning and moving forward, and things that you know, they're kind of learning together, as well as kind of connect some of those kind of advocates with the people that are still kind of dipping their toe, so we can get everyone kind of joined up. But I just think it's an important kind of place to start, is that kind of headspace that we're kind of coming from. Can we move on again? Lovely. I guess in internal comms, you know, we've got this kind of unique place where actually you know, we're not immune to this anxiety and kind of worry, right? Because I mean, I like to think everyone at some point has been worried about actually what's going to happen with their job, with the speed of everything changes. I know when me and my friends get together, we joke about setting up a commune, have an argument about who's going to be the baker versus the carpenter. I think I'll be better with the wood than the stove, but you know, I'll kind of try and handle whatever. But you know, we do have this anxiety, and we have it whilst we're having to think about actually how we support the organization through this. So, you know, the stats on screen here was from a slightly smaller study. I think the Institute of Internal Comms Index last year put that about 48% of IT professionals are actually kind of worried about kind of job future and anxiety. But the fact is that, you know, the majority of internal comms professionals are kind of in a space where they're hearing from the business, you know, we want more people to be using AI. We need to advance ourselves in this area. You know, you guys are kind of key to helping us kind of move this forward. But then there seems to be a bit of a space in terms of, well, actually, this is how we're doing it. Here's all the tools. Here's the kind of laddering to take you forward. So it makes it quite a kind of difficult space to be in. But that's just a little bit of context setting. I know kind of Sarah lives and breathes IC and can kind of pick up from here and kind of go on a bit better for us. So Sarah, can I pass to you?
Yeah, of course. So we've very much been on a journey over 18 months ago, probably just a little over 18 months ago. We introduced an AI tool that was a self-created, an in-house tool that was sandboxed and enabled people to put confidential company information in and start playing with the concept of using AI on a day-to-day basis. Since then, we've introduced many more tools. Even in the last week, we've now introduced Claude. So we're very much on a journey. We also have around 3,500 technologists in our business of a 9,000 size organization. So we've got a real and then we have a part of the organization which is very much about publishing and editorial, and then we have operations and functions, and then sales teams. So we've got a real federated organization that want to use AI in different ways, but also have different experience of it. So one of the things we're looking at is how we very carefully navigate the risk of a two-tier workforce. So when we start to introduce AI at Elsevier, we use, you know, our leaders start to talk about things like the benefits. So things are going to be faster, they're going to be smarter, we're going to be more productive, we're going to be more efficient. But in reality, what employees are probably thinking more about is it safe? Is my job safe? You touched on this, Simon. Am I being monitored? What's the expectation? So we talk about three things being really integral to how we take our organization on this change. Creating clarity. So what is our expectation of you? What are the guardrails? You know, what are the tools that are available for you to use? Confidence, so your ability to know how to go about navigating and using the tools, and also capability. So day to day, how do I prompt? How do I think about building agents? So we think about these three things, and all three things are required really to build a high level of trust. So next slide, please. So when we look at what's happening with AI inside organizations, and as Elsevier is no different, some are racing ahead, some people are more skeptical, some people are quietly watching, some are pretending it's not relevant to them at all. And I think there's few and far between of those, I have to say, at Elsevier, given we're a technology organization. But as a result, it's starting to feel a little bit chaotic. And that sense of chaos actually does have quite a predictable pattern. And that's something that's really important to us as internal communicators to recognize and start to think about. So next slide. I want to show you something called the Rogers diffusion of innovation, and this applies to many, many things that we'll look at. And please do click through all of those. So if you think about your employees in this way, it's really helpful because then you can be more nuanced in the way that you approach things. So we have innovators, and these are people who are experimenting. They've probably got the tools themselves, they're already using them. I met someone last week who's been using Claude for over a year, even though it's only just being introduced to the business. So they're well ahead of many people who are just starting to use it for the first time. Then you've got early adopters, so they're really curious. They can be massively influential, and they're watching how the leadership navigate this. They'll move, but they want permission, and they'll do things within the parameters of the organization. Then you've got the early adopters, and they're the ones who are kind of very cautious of the hype. They're asking, is it safe? They're asking, am I doing the right things? Do I look foolish? How do I compare to my colleagues? You've got the late majority who are generally overloaded. They're quite process driven. They're quite risk sensitive, and maybe they're thinking, I'm not. This isn't. You know, I'm going to wait and see where this goes. And then finally, and I hate this word, the laggards, and I think that's a really unfair word, but they're often resistant and slightly feel exposed, maybe aren't confident with technology. And the percentages here won't be far away from what we'll see on average in an organisation. So it's a great way to think about when you're, for example, thinking about training or development. How do you cater for these different groups? And also, how do you think about peer-to-peer learning, buddying up, thinking about how you're kind of sharing that experience? Next slide, please. So we have a responsibility, I think, to be really clear about what AI is here for our organisation. What are the guardrails? What are the kind of red lines? Where should it be used? And where should decisions remain human? And that's a really important point, because I think a lot of people do fear this sense of, is AI going to take my role? Is my role going to change? But actually, the human element to it is incredibly important, and it's just about how that evolves and the way that we think about it. So next slide, please. So I think AI-enabled culture is going to be the biggest change program that we will ever deliver in our careers. It is absolutely enormous when we think about the skills upgrade, when we think about technology introduction, when we think about the pace of change, when we think about how an organization has to even adapt its processes and systems to adapt to the pace. So for example, we were talking last week about how we're going to go from, you know, how we might start to think about going from annual financial cycles to 8-week financial cycles, because the process of innovation, development, testing and delivery to customer is becoming so much shorter, and that will continue. So it's really interesting, and I think we need to take a step back, think of it as a program of activity, and think about that change curve and understand that it's a long-term process. Next slide. So we've just got to be really careful within this whole program of change that we aren't creating this two-tier workforce where we've got AI adopters who are curious, they're experimental, they're productivity focused, and they're thinking about how to task AI and how to make their jobs more efficient, versus the AI non-adopters who are more skeptical. They observe, they don't necessarily engage. So how do we take everyone on that journey with us? And I think one of the things, a quote that I've heard many, many times, I'm sure you have too, is this idea that AI won't replace humans. Humans who use AI will replace humans that don't. And we talk about that a lot at Elsevier to really drive that sense of curiosity, but also urgency. So I think that's it from me.
Yeah. Thanks, Sarah. And I think both you and Simon have framed the rest of the conversation really nicely, thinking about not just adoption of technology, but the importance of that change curve and identifying those people that, you know, in the Rogers diffusion of innovation are the laggards who just they're not ready for change. They're not ready for it. But then this quote encapsulates, you do need to be ready and you need to be on the pulse for it right now. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit and just talk about the relevance of AI and also the intranet today, because many of you watching this today will be internal communicators who are perhaps responsible for looking after your intranet. But we have to start with a simple truth that despite, you know, all the growth of things around collaboration tools that we've seen in the last 10 years with Teams, Viva Engage, the intranet is still the front door to most people's digital workplace. And no matter what people want to understand, whether it's find out what leadership are saying, find information that they need to trust and be verified, they turn typically to the intranet, that front door to your organization. And the problem that people are facing isn't relevance, it's the expectation that I don't want to just come to the intranet now just to find out news and policy information. I want to come there for purpose, to find an answer, to find something simple and easily, and to help me to navigate around my organization in the most simple way possible, like whether that's, in teams where people are working. And what's actually starting to happen is that the intranet is having more relevance than ever before because it's a trusted source and a trusted location. And it's more than just a website. It's in this particular hybrid world that we now work in, it's the entry point where you might not go to the office anymore. It's that anchor that you go to find, real information about your organization, but you feel connected to it. And I think that the relevance of the intranet today, it is more around, I'm going here to help me connect with my business. And how do AI and agents come into that? Well, that friction, that barrier of helping me to do something and to get something done, I think AI and agents can really address that. Many of the major concerns that I'm quite fortunate that I get to speak to many internal comms people a lot about how their intranets are performing. And the things that I typically hear, it's the same thing again and again. Employees go there and they can't find what they're looking for, or everything that they find is outdated. It's too complex to navigate. I don't know where I am. So how can we change that experience and change the lens to help people navigate through faster and giving them a better employee experience when they land on that intranet, so that they can say, I know what I'm coming here. I'm coming here to find some information. Where can I get that done? So one of the things for me is that blend of productivity with employee engagement is starting to have more and more prominence. And I like to think of that when I think about a journey um, from a standard built intranet of, this is my core purpose is content and publishing, all the way through to the right hand side, which is a truly engaging digital workplace. And what I've highlighted here in that row about AI agents and their role, you might start simple with, helping me find information and help me summarize content that's on a page, all the way through to a bit more employee experience of like, actually, I'm coming here to help me kind of navigate my way around and to find information, but surface some insights from perhaps another platform, maybe from SAP, maybe from Oracle, whatever it might be. And then through to that far end of the digital workplace solution where things are more orchestrated and their execution is more seamless, and agents can actually complete the tasks ready, like it already knows what you're coming there to do in the context of how you work and the navigation you've taken to find that agent. So something that I want to just address is start simple with the Microsoft Copilot. Some of you and many of you hopefully will have experienced Copilot and tried out Researcher and Analyst. All of those three things, if you rewind the clock 18 months, they were painful in some ways. And I thought it was a load of lies that it was bringing back to me. Fast forward to today and some of the things that it's bringing back, it's a heck of a lot better than it was then. And we're now ready to start experimenting. And many organizations are moving beyond experimentation into the agents that are ready to help you do that self-service and to help you to come and get something done. And these are the sorts of agents that can live within your intranet. On the far right hand side, I actually think these are more digital workplace solutions where you're thinking about a custom built solution that perhaps is connected to multiple different systems. And it may be that you're on a journey to get there. But the reality is all of these things can be accessed and launched from your intranet or within Teams, however you need to access it. But that evolution from an intranet being a static workplace of news content being pushed out, most organizations I speak to, no matter what size, whether you're enterprise level, a few hundred users, they're starting to think more and more about how agents sit within that. So what we're just going to move into a discussion now with Sarah and Simon is our experience of what have we seen within organizations that help prioritize and identify when AI is right to step in. And I think, Sarah, you had a slide that was talking about that. Like, it's not just for AI's sake, it has a role to play. It's coming in and actually performing a task. And Simon, we're going to do a bit of a demo in a bit. But how have we seen this evolution of finding the right places where our AI can make a difference? And where have we seen it perhaps streamlining processes?
I mean, I'm happy to talk to that first, if that's okay. I mean, For me, it typically kind of turns up when you feel yourself doing a task, which is, I don't know if repetitive is the right word, but you can see the task is structured in such a way that actually that it'd be easy to get, someone else or an agent to do this with the kind of right instructions. An example from kind of agency side, when we finish a project, we would typically create a case study, which would be a particular kind of like format to, explain why we did this project, what we did, and then what the results were. We're doing this all the time, so it's like, well, why don't we kind of build an agent, right? So we've got an agent that we can essentially drop all of the documents from the project in. We can click on the little mic button and just talk to it for a minute about the project, and then it will kind of output this kind of perfect case study as a result. So you'll typically find in like your daily tasks, there'll be things that you think, well, actually, why am I doing this every time? We're following a sort of similar format, similar approach. I could get an agent to do that. And that for me feels like that kind of natural first step of get it to take the tasks that free up your time and give you a little bit more strategy space.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I completely agree with that. I think we're doing, even over the next couple of months, a lot of work to automate some of our workflows and start to think about how we can take that level of transactional work out of our day-to-day. I think we are also, it's very much helping us think about our writing and communications. So we use a technique called smart brevity, which is from Axios HQ. We've done a lot of work with them over the last 12 months to help us be more concise in our writing. So combining that in terms of style and tone with, for example, mass information about our strategy delivered through different scripting or particular presentations enables us to continue to use really authentic, humble, on-brand kind of language, but also make sure we're hitting all the messaging. So that's really useful. Right through to, and the thing that I definitely find has just saved me hours and even weeks is just mass data analysis and insight-driven findings out of mass data. And even finding things that I think as a human you might miss. But also then just making sure you've got that human insight to just still always kind of just look over that qualitative information, see if there's any nuance. So human oversight continues to be super important. So many use cases, and it does beg the question: if it's enabling all of this, what skill set do we need in the future as internal communicators to enable that? So that's really interesting to me.
Just one add on that. I mean, the data one is huge, right? Having done lots of employee insight, the data analysis is an absolute kind of game changer. But another area that I guess is kind of less obvious and super useful is like where we are creating things like employer brand guidebooks or even IC strategies. Typically these things kind of live in a folder somewhere and we kind of reference them at kind of key times, but rarely you'll using them in kind of every decision day to day. And actually using agents to kind of own those things can be super useful. So if it is your IC strategy or your employer brand book or whatever, you get an agent to essentially own that document. And then actually when you're putting in your draft communications or plans, campaigns, thoughts, for how you're going to approach stuff, you run it through and it kind of validates it against that and kind of corrects you and gives you that kind of steering to make sure we are reinforcing all of these points that we spent so much time and effort to determine. We are kind of really aligning to our strategy and kind of taking it forwards. We can take those things that often live in folders and just make them almost living and breathing by putting them in an agent.
So I think one of the things that we've heard there is that agents are useful pretty much everywhere. And one of the things that I've seen is agents for an agent's sake is not the right approach. And I think we've moved beyond that world of using AI necessarily just as an FAQ or here's a question, give me an answer back. The world we're starting to move into. And Sarah, I'm going to invite you in a minute just to talk a little bit about your course that you went on last week and what you showed us earlier on in your manual. But one thing that's becoming clear is that the growth of agents and how they're evolving, it's only going to grow exponentially. And here from the International Data Corporation, their data provided by Microsoft is 1.3 billion agents created by 2028. 1.3 billion. That's an incredible number of how we're going to start thinking about agents coming into probably our personal lives as well as our work lives and how they can just help us to automate and get stuff done. But something we've kind of put a bit of a pattern towards is thinking that different phases of approach. And human with assistant, I felt like was the introduction of Copilot. So if you're part of an early adopter, or if you picked up your phone and you use ChatGPT on your phone to have a conversation, it was like, great, this is a thing that can really help me to get stuff done. And your different generations are discovering that phase one experience. Where we're starting to evolve, last year and this year is having human plus agent teams where we think about, okay, well, I do this role, but I need to be able to delegate some tasks to get stuff done. And there's some autonomy that can be done here. There's a task that we regularly do. And what you said about number crunching with, vast amount of data, that may have been done by a person, but actually we can get that done faster and, more efficiently with an agent. But Sarah, I think it's just interesting what you're starting to experience and the question that you asked about AI strategy, and you and your organization are likely in phase three of human-led but agent-operated. Sarah, can you just talk a little bit about how you're evolving that within Elsevier and your experience over the last week?
So very, very early stages, Alex. So I come with a caveat, but
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to attend. We had a senior leadership group meeting last, top 150. And as part of the agenda, we had a 2-hour training session with Anthropic, and Claude is something that was then introduced to that community and will be rolled out over the next couple of weeks across Elsevier. And we were asked to experiment with it. And it was very interesting where people started. So one of the things that really caught my attention in that process was this. I think you talk about it. Is it frontier mindset you mentioned? Is that right, Alex? Have I got that right?
Yep, that's right. Yeah.
It's just where people start in terms of their thinking. So some people went to redesign a process. Some people went to do something basic by turning some thinking into a PowerPoint deck. I decided to go big last week, and I inputted my internal communication strategy for 2026 and asked it to build me a team of agents that would have the perfect sort of job titles and roles to be able to deliver that strategy for me. And it produced something quite incredible. So it produced me a playbook of an AI agent team. And there were 9 jobs in my team. And it created a full profile for each job and also a prompt for that job. And I was then able to upload reference materials depending on what the job was. So, for example, one of my agents is an IC Insights and Measurement agent. So I'm able to upload our internal comms dashboard. It can also input we have always on listening tools. So we're able to input data from Office 5 and also from our EOS scores, as well as kind of survey materials. So that's just one example. And then it can develop on a monthly basis a routine insights dashboard for me, just produces that for me and provides insights in a way that we haven't traditionally had the time necessary or resource to do. So it's been an incredible experience. And this was only last week. So already I've created a campaign, I've created a measurement dashboard, I've redeveloped some of our thinking around our learning lab strategy, which is our commercial acumen strategy for next year. It's created an entire spreadsheet for me. Just this morning in 30 minutes, it turned around all of our feedback from the event last week into an insights document, which is 20 pages long. So I'm just experimenting. It's blowing my mind. And it's really I'm already seeing mass efficiency, high quality output in a way that's really surprised me. Yes, I've had to go through everything. And yes, I've found things I want to change, but I'd say about less than 10%. And the time it's saved is incredible. So it started to make me think, well, really, my role starts to be what the art of the possible is, my imagination, my creativity, my ability to make judgment calls about the quality of the output in a way that traditionally I might have had to kind of go through reams and reams of data and analyze it. So it's very much changing my role. So it's very exciting, but I'm very much at the beginning of the journey, Alex.
Yeah, and I think what you're describing there is something that is that kind of human led. So you are, like you said, 90% of it, you're happy with it, but you're still leading it. You're still reviewing everything that's the output there to check it for quality. But you've delegated all of these kind of tasks and capabilities that you need to be done. And I've also done a lot of reading and things over the last 18 months that you're starting to see those agents now in some organizations appearing on organization charts. So you're now going to become a manager, an agent manager of these agents, and they report into you, Sarah, and they get these things done. They're part of your org chart. I'm not saying they're going to have names and you're going to give them a name and have a personality, but they have a role to fill and they're part of the team. And I definitely think in the next 18 months, that's something that's going to be seen more and more within organizations. So I think that phase 3, human-led, agent-operated, sounds like Sarah's starting to get there. But many organizations that I'm still speaking to, they're getting ready for that kind of in phase 1, but perhaps moving in towards phase 2 of agents to help them complete tasks, but not quite so autonomous and orchestrated in the way that Sarah just described, where your agent, Sarah, may even be working together to have conversations with each other and get stuff done. And that's that kind of frontier evolution that I was thinking about. Great. So just to take a point to please keep any questions coming in and use the chat and use the reactions. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and sharing this presentation. I'm going to move into a demo, but I just want to set the scene before I do that to say what I'm going to show you now is part of the a live campaign demo agent in SharePoint. So I'm now linking it back to the intranet experience, how you can create perhaps what is the lowest barrier to entry for an agent. I'm going to run through that, and hopefully, again, as I said earlier, the demo gods are still with me. We can run through this really nice and simply, and then I'm going to hand over to Si to share your screen, Si, and then you can do your demo as well afterwards. So I'm just going to change my screen sharing. Okay, so what we're looking at here is just a demo SharePoint environment. It could be your organization's university, so your organization's intranet. It has some news at the top here, has news feeds pulling through, some links to getting stuff done, just typical kind of layout and structure with some carousels and some information and some Viva Engage pulling through. Where it's kind of slightly different here is that yes, we've got the search in SharePoint at the top, but I've also got the ability to open up an agent on the page and start having a conversation with my agent about, how can you help me? So typically, as I said, people come to the intranet and they're looking for a policy. So rather than kind of navigating through our policy or finding it in SharePoint, I could just come in here and say, oh, actually just coming here to find out what's our policy on remote working. This may take a few seconds to try and work through, but I haven't had to go and try and find that. I haven't had to click through loads of steps to navigate around. And from an experience perspective, when we're thinking about how people work now, when they, I pick up my phone and I'm asking it a question and it gives me an immediate answer, why should the intranet experience be any different? So here it's bringing me back a set of information around our ways of working and a policy. It's knowing, it's applying it to me, who it applies to. It's breaking it down in a structured, consumable way. And it gives me a link to say, this is where that policy was located. And it tells me when it was created and who it was created by and reviewing authority. So I've got loads of information and I trust this because I can feel like actually it's given me some really good. I know when it's effective from, when it's being reviewed. I can trust that this is the source of truth for, the policies within my organization. So that's just one example about how the AI-powered intranet is very, very simple to create just by dropping an agent into a web part on your SharePoint page. Another scenario I just want to run through is, so the agent is Copilot. I just saw somebody demoing there. And this person, so I'm logged in as somebody called Amelia Earhart, and she has a Copilot license. So she has a Copilot license within the organization, which allows her to experience this. So yeah, it's a really good question. I just saw that pop up. I just want to make that clear. Another example of an agent where it can be useful, particularly for internal comms. We've got another part of our university with running an energy week. It might be a campaign, a piece of awareness we're running. It's complemented this SharePoint site here with all of the things that we want to provide information. It looks and feels like my organization. I've got stories around other green initiatives that we've got going on. I've got the ability to see some content within here as well. Nice carousels and layouts within our SharePoint campaign site. But actually I've got here my energy week agent. So my energy week agent is there ready for me to, well, I don't want to have to read all of those things. And how can I get involved with Energy Week? And I could either talk to it by clicking the icon, or I could just ask it a question. And again, it's coming back and saying, well, this is how you can get involved. I'm just going to leave that running in the background and just, in the interest of time, skip over and just show you how easy it is to create this. And again, everything I'm showing today is using SharePoint. Is what we're looking at today. So many of you will know a SharePoint document library when you see one. But actually, what we're going to do now is because this lady Amelia has a license for Copilot, I can now have an option to create an agent. And the agent here is just simply grounded in this library. So AI actions, create an agent. And here I can start describing, it's going to be my energy week agent. And I can now start to build out this agent. What's the purpose of the agent? Where's it going to get the information from? Well, because I created this agent inside this library, it's grounded within this campaign week. So actually the data that it uses as the source of truth is within this SharePoint site, within this document library. And I can give it some instructions to say, this is what I need you to do, the starter prompts that you see on the right-hand side here that it typically has. And I could actually start to give it some more instructions, but I could have gone through this and created an agent and the parameters that it works within, the tone that I want it to come back with an informational tone, telling it it's first targeting perhaps students or staff within a university. I can click create on that agent. And I've created my own agent for this campaign specifically, not my whole intranet agent, just a campaign agent here in about 3 minutes. And all that does is I can then have an agent, it sits within this document library, and it allows me to do exactly this by adding a web part onto the SharePoint page, which again, many of you will know how to do. And it allows people to start and interact and how can I get involved? And it's providing answers back from the PowerPoints, from the PDFs, from the Word documents that I've uploaded into that library. And it's telling a student how they can get involved with the University Energy Week. So that's my simple demo. And again, think about the scale and complexity of this. I'm starting simple here. This isn't a really fully orchestrated big scale agent that's going to have any automation behind it. It's a simple entry point into how you can start to use AI within your intranet to help to provide information. Si, I'm going to hand over to you for your demo. I'm just going to have a look at some of the chat questions while I do that. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Awesome, thank you. I totally have like a low tolerance for reading lots of information, so that agent totally appeals to me as well, I've got to say. Cool, right, let me just share my screen and I'll explain what I'm to show. So look, I wanted to share an agent that we kind of set up recently, and it feels like it's just a super practical one that anyone on the call could go away and start, orchestrating themselves. And as kind of Sarah said earlier, it sort of starts with that kind of vision and ambition, right? So what we wanted to achieve, we know that employee feedback, employee co-creation creates the best communications, right? Make sure it lands well. Lots of organizations have groups of employees that they have set up for this, whether it's kind of an IC network or an employee experience squad. Maybe you meet them once a month or every couple of weeks. They can check in on your kind of strategy campaign, maybe review some materials, give you really good feedback to, iterate, validate and improve and make sure you get to that best possible place. Now, I don't think AI is ever going to replace that actual employee, cooperation, insight, etc. But what it can do is it can kind of give us some of that in the room at a moment's notice whenever we need it. So, when we do need to make a quick decision when we can't get employees in, actually we could use AI to give us some of that employee-centric view and kind of help us do that. And the way that we do that is, we look at an organization, we look at their audiences and we go, who are the key audiences in this organization? Let's build some insight into each of those. Let's create a persona that talks about their goals, their frustrations, their needs, etc. Let's see what data will supplement that, and let's build that into an agent. So this agent knows that there's 5 key populations, we've got data on each, we've got an overview. It can give us insights from all of those. So essentially what I've got here is a demo. It's based around 3 fictional personas with some fictional data, just because we don't want to share anything sensitive, obviously, for the sake of this. But I'm going to kind of give it a prompt and just kind of show you guys what I mean. This is a typical kind of Copilot page, by the way, so hopefully you guys are kind of fairly familiar. But I'm going to say to this, say we ran a town hall on AI last week. We want to help managers talk to their employees about it, help us do this across audiences. The great thing is it doesn't care if I put loads of spelling mistakes in there as well, so that's always a win. So what it's going to do is going to kind of reference the personas and the data that we've uploaded. It's actually hinged off a SharePoint site, so we've got a folder for each of those different kind of populations. built into this, we've got frontline employees, so people who are looking after customers, maybe don't have email addresses, etc. We've got project managers and kind of change managers, so people who are really kind of in the how do we do it. And then we've got an expert community, who is essentially those that, you know, want to really understand the why and have their chance to kind of challenge and kind of be a part of that journey as well. So it will review across all of those. We've given it like a kind of a fairly strict way of playing back any prompt, any kind of insight from the prompts. So it will kind of give a little, here's a kind of overview of what you just asked me. Here's a insights from each of these different personas. So here's how the employee might react. Here's the things that you need to kind of think about. And then it will kind of round it all off in a kind of so what. So actually, you know, when you're thinking of your plans, here's the risks to kind of be aware of. And then actually, you know, here's what you need to do as a result. So you'll see, you know, I've asked it, okay, how do we engage managers following a town hall on AI? It'll give me that playback. Okay, here's what you said you wanted to do, so I can make sure it's understood correctly. And then it will give me that playback by audience. So for frontline employees, it's identified, you know, they're time poor, often away from desks, etc. They can be highly sensitive to practical impact, and maybe, you know, so it's to highlight the kind of potential anxiety and worry that we might have around this population. And it's pulled out from some of the data we've kind of added as well in terms of, you know, some of their kind of preferences there. It'll go through and kind of do this for each group. So actually, you know, for the project management office, it's about misalignment between comms and delivery. That's where their concerns are. And then for expert communities, it'll be slightly different. Obviously, you guys have all got totally different audiences, but hopefully you can kind of see the application. And then it will say, here's the things that we've got to look out for. So for frontline, you know, one of the big things is kind of job threat. You know, they feel that might have heard it late second hand, not all of them might be able to attend this town hall, for example. For PMO, actually it's the lining up of the delivery, you know, what happens when the delivery isn't kind of ready for all this kind of talk, etc., etc. And then it will kind of go through and go, look, well, here's the opportunities. So here's how we can use managers to do it, use them as the kind of sense-making layer. You know, show that we're kind of ready as that kind of translator. You know, give the PMO a pack that they can use consistently for decision logs, etc. And some really kind of practical options. Okay, what you can do as a result of this. So, you know, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all these, but hopefully you can see the relevance and where it can add value, giving us that lens from the employee perspective based on data we've given it, and just ensure that our thinking is kind of employee centric. And there's one more prompt off the back of this. I could follow up and say, give me 10 questions each audience might ask. So if we wanted to kind of prep managers for some follow-up kind of conversation, this will go through, and based on all that kind of data, we'll go, okay, here's the 10 sort of likely things you're going to hear from each of these groups, so we can make sure that we're kind of, you know, pre-arming them in this scenario. So for frontline, what does this actually change in my day-to-day work? Is it going to affect my job? You know, for the PMO, okay, who owns this initiative? You know, what decisions have already been made? So very much in the kind of thick of the delivery aspects of it. And then for the expert community, okay, well, what's the rationale? You know, help me understand this. What's the evidence there? You can see how it takes all of those different views. So we can use it for saying, you know, we're going to work through this kind of change plan. How might these groups react to it? What are their likely questions? How can we improve these comms? We could drop in a planned communication draft and say, help make this work for our expert communities. We could give access to a leader who's done a presentation for frontline and is going to go out and speak to the PMO and say, well, actually, how do I make this presentation work for PMO, knowing that they're different from frontline? So it just ensures in all of these scenarios, we've got almost an employee voice in the room that's helping us, you know, keep things employee centric. And a lot of it is stuff that, you know, we might know and we might, you know, do in the majority of situations, but being able to do it 100% of the time with, you know, essentially 100% accuracy at a moment's notice is where it becomes kind of super valuable. So I hope that makes sense to everyone. Obviously, any kind of questions in the chat, and we're going to do our best to pick those up. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, Alex, and we'll pass back to you.
Thanks, Si. And again, thank you everybody for the questions that are coming in. I'm doing my best to try and work across the chat and the Q&A. So I will again pick up and back up on some of them towards the end of the session as we go down. But yeah, do keep the questions and chat coming in. And as mentioned, I will make sure that anything that we don't get to answer today, we will pick up afterwards and share along with the recording as well. Sarah just messaged to say that she's lost video, but hopefully you can still hear us. I
Yeah,
think you
still
said.
here, Alex.
Okay,
Still
cool.
here.
Great, thank you. Great. So moving on to next section. So just some real world agent cases, and I think this may answer some of the questions that are coming in around the ability for agents to search across other platforms, and also somebody saying about SharePoint, does it only search SharePoint pages as well? So I wanted to give you some real life scenarios where agents can be created, particularly for internal comms. So what I've got here is the left-hand side and the right-hand side. The left-hand side is let's just keep it nice and simple, looking at things like helping you to create a tone of voice. So you can give the agent some instructions, provided some materials that, it may be a leader comms that you're working on. Give it some information, ground it in the context of what people have been talking about, how the leader talks. That's the very simple agents. It just needs some data to give you the output. And as you move along, I've just shown you a campaign agent, and that was just grounded in SharePoint as a SharePoint agent. On the right-hand side, you start to see things like more employee self-service, and more advanced ones. So somebody asked a question, Carmel, you asked a question about searching across other platforms. So this is where the agents really are positioned to be part of that digital workplace experience. And so pulling in information from things like ServiceNow or whatever it may be, that cross-platform or even cross-team information sharing. So you can connect a Copilot agent out to the other system. It can reference all of the data and pull information back in. Absolutely, you can do that. However, you need something called Copilot Studio to do that. And I mentioned in the Q&A, it's likely to be someone in IT that needs to help make that happen as well. All the way through to customer support agents, where you can think about having, an agent that's on your website, and that again can be using Azure Foundry to build that, where it can address tickets and issues based that people raise, and it gives you the ability to have far more complex and integrations with other agents. And that concept of agents working with other agents, absolutely something that your agents can achieve. Just needs a bit more mapping out and complexity. So everything I've shown you in the demo and Sai showed you, you can build out using a native language. You talk to it and it can build that agent. Anything that involves plumbing, like connecting to other systems, connecting the pipes, that's something called Copilot Studio, and likely where you need to get IT involved to help you do those things, but all perfectly achievable and possible. Just how I just got conscious of time, we've got 10 minutes left. How you might go about kind of identifying those. So just a simple matrix that you might want to steal, just a high impact quick wins and the low effort and time, making those tactical improvements, thinking about the types of agents that you might have within your organization. What Sarah talks about in terms of how she's built an army of agents to help her to make decisions and to analyze data, to implement strategy. You probably think that's going to be a high impact, but actually the reality may be that time and effort may be low, because actually you're just giving it a set of instructions, and all of the long hard work is actually done because you've already created a strategy document yourself. You're giving that information to AI. So the strategic bets may be faster to achieve than you actually think, because you've got a lot of the groundwork covered. So just a matrix to help you understand how those agents, from a simple all the way through to advanced, can be mapped, and you can realize the benefits and the impact that they may have. The last 5 minutes, I just want to cover off as I start to think about leaning into the future. And we talked a little about something called the frontier mindset. And now that you've seen some of the demos and use cases, I hope it's becoming clearer kind of what some of those things that you can think about using, moving into that kind of intelligent intranet, moving towards the digital workplace experience. The points I just want to cover off here are, again, some of these are frontier features from Microsoft, and Sarah and I both talked about that frontier mindset. That's innovation. How can we lead it forward? How can we change from being reactive and just using AI to generate content and ask us, just create me a set of information or create me a new PowerPoint slide based upon some images that I give you? How can I change that and shift gears into something that's a bit more strategic? Well, some of the new features that are rolling out from Microsoft right now, around Copilot Cowork, I'll just cover this one. So Copilot Cowork is the newest feature from Microsoft. It was actually launched about 6 weeks ago. And Sarah mentioned, and I think somebody's also asked a question around what's the preference between using Copilot or Claude, or is it company dependent? So something that you're likely to start seeing across multiple vendors, and Microsoft have already started to do, is they're bringing in the models from Claude or Anthropic into Copilot. So you're starting to have the ability to have multi-model experiences through Copilot. And what Cowork does is it's taking it beyond, I need you to give me back an answer. This is actually evolving to, I want you to help me to get stuff done, either planning for things and looking at the context of your diary and what you're doing, and it knows how and who you work with, using something called Work IQ, which I'll cover very shortly. But this is probably one of my favorite features about Copilot right now, but that's been released in the last 12 months, and it's going to move to general availability probably in the next quarter. So if you get the opportunity to work with your organization to have access to Copilot Cowork, this is where the moving beyond that phase one into more of a phase two. Can you help me to get stuff done that I'm going to delegate a task to you? I need you to create me a set of reports based upon some information that you know about me and the information I have you can find about me. And then you can actually say, well, now can you do this every week? And just give it to me, put it into Teams, send me a notification once you've done it every week. And you can start to automate some processes using the same instructions every time. And that's really the key difference between an agent and chat, like you've experienced. An agent has a memory. It has an ability to know who you are, how you work. And Microsoft have something called Work IQ. So the reason why I'm telling you as an audience this is it's something that you're likely to start hearing these phrases. Like, what is Work IQ? Why should I care? What does it mean to me? I've heard of maybe the Microsoft Graph about 10 years ago when Microsoft started to talk about that. But Work IQ is the new thing that sits underneath Copilot. And it's a bit that knows who you are, where you sit in the organization, it's memory, but also it can understand why you're looking for something, and the results it gives you back are far more accurate. So the pain that you had with Copilot perhaps 12 months ago of like, that's not quite what I'm looking for, you will have seen the models changing. And actually, even yesterday they moved to ChatGPT 5.5. That was announced yesterday, and Claude is now becoming free as part of Copilot Chat within Microsoft 365 and Copilot as well. So you're starting to see this multi-model approach, which is giving far better data and far better outputs within the information that you give it. And then just finally, one of the things that I heard this week about Work IQ, think about your sat nav. Work IQ is the thing that tells you where the traffic is. It tells you what route you should take and what matters right now and which route makes sense. Whereas the old kind of way of working using the Microsoft Graph, that's just the map. It's static. It knows where the streets and buildings are. But Work IQ is the bit that helps you navigate around to get the smart work you need done right now, give it the answers you need. So I just want to give you a little glimpse into the future there of what it looks like and a couple of new things that are coming out that are likely land with you in that next quarter. So just before we go into final Q&A in the last 5 minutes, just to help you to think about how you can start to think about moving from the simple human interactions and moving from conversations into more in getting work done. This slide is just meant to represent an evolution. But actually, one of the things that Sarah, you mentioned earlier on about that reskilling people for growth, and you've experienced this yourself in the last week, how important that is that you're able to take an idea and a concept from, I think we should have an agent, this is where we should use it, I do this task on a regular basis, to upskilling people to have that change of mindset. I think as well as one of the things that you said in your early slides, it's not just a skills and capability, it's a change of how I work and how I do. So I don't know, Sarah, whether you want to comment on that just quickly before we close out. And I'd just look at some of the Q&A about the importance of that skilling people for future growth.
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely think that we've been on a bit of a journey with our development and training, and over the last 18 months, really starting at some of the basic levels of what is AI, why would you use it, how to prompt, so sort of task-based activity that you can use it for, right through to really in-depth training now. And it's a journey that you've got to take people on. I think there's a really interesting debate, and I don't have the answer to it, about what does it mean for young graduates or people entering the workplace, and how are we evolving? I mean, even I was talking to the Institute of Internal Communications last week about their training offering and how that's got to evolve, to think about, you know, the way that we operate and that we deliver internal communications going forward. So yeah, it is definitely a change of mindset in terms of thinking agent and human. It's a change of mindset about being curious, constantly curious, having a learning and development kind of outlook, not being scared to fail, take risks, try new things, which is not always, it comes very naturally to me, but it doesn't always come naturally to everyone. Yeah, and it's just how we support that next generation and the skills gap that they're going to have, especially with, I've got an 18-year-old daughter and a 16-year-old daughter who are not allowed to use AI at school at all. So they're going to come out of school not really having the experience of the tools in the way that I'm being encouraged to do within the workplace. So that's also a really interesting dynamic. So yeah, I think we're sort of finding our way, Alex.
Si, any other comments from you before I just quickly look at the Q&A?
No, I think Sarah summed up nicely, and I think in the interest of time, mate, feel free to crack on.
Cool. So I'm just going to stop sharing that so we can just see this now. So we've addressed a lot of the questions that are in there. If I just scroll down, so the preference between Claude and Copilot, it's company dependent. I think Sarah, did you jump in and answer that one?
I did. So we currently have Microsoft 360 Copilot. This is integrated into our Microsoft tools, so people use it, for example, to scan email or work with SharePoint. We've got ChatGPT Enterprise, which we use much more for things like content creation, for knowledge retrieval. It complements kind of company data and analytics. So that's really cool. And I think Claude now, which is going to be introduced, takes it to another level again, where it's a really thoughtful analysis. So it's doing the thinking and the doing and the crunching. And I think I've really seen a quality step change using Claude in what I've been getting from other tools. So I think it's actually not about providing any one tool. Actually, I think it's better to provide a lot of different tools, because people go on the journey with them and use them for different things. And it's all about adoption. So the best thing you can do, or the thing that we are definitely doing, is just putting all the tools out there, providing all the training, making sure leaders are, inspiring their teams and leading by example, and really encouraging people to self-learn and self-trial.
There's off the back of that, I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying. So there's the kind of element of play, isn't there? Like people just need to pick it up and try stuff, and you know, get it wrong to start with, but just work out what works for you. And so the more we can give people the chance to kind of play and learn through doing, like, the better, I think.
Okay, well, I think that's a really nice place to draw it to a close with 30 seconds left. But thank you both, Sarah and Si, for attending today and to supporting with the conversation. We will be able to share the recording, and you can share it amongst your team as well. And any questions that have just come in that I haven't yet been able to address, I'll make sure that we follow up after the session as well, and make them also visible so everybody can see. Well, thank you very much, everybody, and have a great sunny afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, bye.